Yes, they did.
What time, what was like their best time?
They're like, is it playing?
Lucy ran a couple and then her ankles gave out on her, but Maddie's, I don't know what her best time
Gravity is really
was
strong.
today's meet. Like, there's no hills in that one. But she missed going to state by 2 places at the end of the season, and then she ran the 200 miles.
McKenna's trying to find the password.
Coach had her run over the summer and stuff, and then her hip started to hurt. Went to physical therapist, and they said, yeah, sometimes with ladies' hips, it's just a little bit different angle they do. But says you can still run cross country as long as you don't run up hills or run fast.
So,
What?
point.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So she didn't run. She still runs, but not competitively or anything.
Or
But
fast.
She was probably nice.
well, no. Now she can run fast and uphill. Just
Oh, that's good.
yeah, but she doesn't like compete and keep that from going. Hopefully that you know what, that's as good as we're gonna hope for there. All right, sort of.
Tell me when you're rolling. I want to say hi to Excel.
Did you know the weather's
Axel
here?
Bickenbaugh was supposed to come take the quiz today, but she didn't.
Axel,
You
think
know the
about
weather's
it.
here?
Yeah, I literally said hi to her and asked her how she was doing.
All right,
Literally.
So we have adaptations, and ladies, this is things that I think everybody believes in. If you have a dog, all of our dogs, it can be adapted one to the others, and they go all the way from huge Newfoundland dogs that kids can actually ride on to little dogs that ladies carry around in their purse and they take them everywhere. Well, I don't know if I go demon, but just tiny little things, and it's just by changing things, sort of. It's not that dogs are going to change into bears. That's the macroevolution. That's what Mr. Comfort was trying to get the scientists to show them an example of that macroevolution, change of kinds. We haven't seen that. We can see adaptations, and you can see if you have an, especially if it's an alpha male or a female in like wolves that are a little bit taller, then they're gonna live longer, be healthier if they can run faster and can chase down more prey. They'll pass on, and the whole pack, and sometimes the pack will split off. If there's males, too many males there, they will shun some of them. They'll go start their own packs, and you can have a whole area where all of a sudden the wolves in that area are noticeably taller than a normal timber wolf. That's an adaptation. Now, a shorter legged wolf, unless it's particularly cunning or something, probably is not going to live as long, won't reproduce as much. Those genes are going to get wiped out. Short and slow wolves are not really the best adapted to hunting, so they're probably going to disappear. So things that actually make an advantage will be kept, but it doesn't actually change from kind to kind. That lit, it's still lit. All right. Explanation, a couple of this one I put in there. A creator gave organisms what they need to survive and play a role in a well choreographed dance.
Wait, do we have to write this?
Yep. It's red. Right.
I just watched cannibalism.
Okay.
Okay, is this like still under?
Yes, it's just the
one?
next slide, yeah. I wasn't really
It's
paying
still under
attention.
5? Or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Or accidentally occurred by the accumulation of random mistakes in copying. Some of them benefit and were kept. Most of them are deleterious, that they're actually going to hurt the organism, so those get wiped out. And the copying of DNA with the cell that each provided a reproductive advantage. Sometimes it's not all that obvious what the advantage is. For example, an elk with a particularly large set of antlers, that's really not an advantage to that if it's being chased by a predator and you're running through an aspen grove trying to get away from it. Big things sticking out of your head that can get caught on branches and trees, not really an advantage. If you had smaller antlers, or if you're like a doe and had no antlers, that's an advantage. But there has to be something that makes it a reproductive advantage. If the does will mate more with a buck with large antlers, then it becomes an advantage. Same thing with peacocks. Having that long tail while being chased by a predator, not a good thing. You can't fly as fast, you can't fly as soon, you can't run as fast. The only thing is if the ladies prefer the large adornment of feathers back there, that makes for a reproductive advantage then. So sometimes you can see a giraffe with a longer neck, wolves with longer legs, cheetah that's a little bit faster. Those are easy to see. Sometimes they're not as easy to see. But you either have to give credit to somebody who is doing it on purpose, or it's just the accumulation of mistakes that happen to give it an advantage.
How fast will these guys get eaten?
And it all depends on how comfortable the bluegill and the bass.
Like, what happens
Okay.
to all the other big fish? Like, what happens?
Yeah,
They're all
there's
just
big
hiding.
ones.
The same three.
Oh yeah, I see the big one.
He's behind the rock, usually back there, but,
He's behind the bushes.
The
okay.
dark one just ate all the william. Or one of the
I'm
little
trying to see him.
Not
eat
all
one.
of them, I can
I
say.
wanna see one eat one.
All right,
He just went.
it's not going to happen all the time. Most of the time it happens right away. Otherwise it happens at night. I come back and there's a bunch gone. I kind of wish they actually would have given me only the 18 I asked for, because they're not the most long-lived little fish, and I will have to come scoop out a bunch of dead ones every day. I feed them, but they just don't live very well. But bait shops don't really count, and if you're going fishing, you don't really want them to count. You want them just to give you a scoop. Be good with it. All right, moving on. Evolution. Now, even if we don't believe in evolution, it is the core concept. Most of biology is based on the idea of evolution now.
It's still part of
5.
No, this is, we have moved on to that. They only five, they kind of moved the 7 characteristics. Usually there's 7.
1.2.
1.2.
So this is moving from essentials of biology
Yeah.
to this?
Yep. This is a new heading. And it has changed. Evolution is the way we name things. It's how we organize things. And we aren't going to be passive aggressive and say that, you know what, I don't believe in evolution, so I'm gonna have my own naming system. That would just be confusing and not really be productive at all. Evolution is a process by which species have changed and diversified since life arose. Allegedly. Now again, as Mr. Comfort said, the only way we can see it is if we talk about things that happened 60 million years ago, 65 million years ago, 150 million years ago. Nothing that we can actually see happening, and well, no, but we have to be, if it's been that long, we have to be 60 million years from somewhere. I mean, we should see something going on. And explains the unity and diversity of life. It is an explanation of how it could once you have life. They still have a real hard time with that first living cell. How we went from a bunch of goo to something that is alive and will reproduce all by itself and continue to live and sustain and be able to start passing it on. That first step's pretty important,
Yeah.
and they have no idea how to do that. Once we have that, then natural selection gives us a mechanism that we could be viable. I mean, not saying that we actually see it happen, but at least we have a chance at that point. But natural selection can't start life.
How is it said that, did they say it came from one?
Yeah, all of it, one common answer, there was one,
How did it reproduce then? How did it make more of itself?
right, and we're gonna talk about that, what they thought what that first thing was, but it keeps changing, because the more we look at it, anything that, you're right, that's gonna be able to stay alive, be able to reproduce, and all that, that's a pretty complex system already to go just from goo to this. And so since they don't know what it is, in most textbooks, this one included, it just states that it happened. No explanation needed, just, if you're not sure how, just say it confidently and people will buy it. And it seems to work. Now the evolutionary tree, remember that what Jaden's talking about, that first ancestor is down here at the bottom. Everything came from that, and as it went up, it started to branch. And as we branch, there's a new change. And then on that change, if there's another change on that, you get another branch that goes off, and then a twig, and it just keeps going. And that's supposed to be how things developed, and you can see where they are and what line they went on. I don't believe that, but all of the things that the way they're named is based on that evolutionary tree. So most creationists just look at it as a way of organizing, more of shelves. Okay, these animals are very similar, they have a lot of things in common, so we're gonna put them together and we will name them similarly. These are different, but they're kind of like each other over here, we'll put them over here. It's an evolutionary thing when we say that, for example, how many of you have a cat at home? Your cat is related to a lion or a tiger or whatever. If we say it's related to, that means that they had a common ancestor. Just like if we say Keely and Bailey are related. I have no idea what the common ancestor, but they probably could. They could tell you that there's a common ancestor. Your mom's? So
Yeah.
your grandparents were the common ancestor that you both came from, and then there was a branching. So they're similar, but they're a little bit different, but they have a common ancestor. So if your cat, Evan, what's your cat's name?
Kitty.
Kitty? Do you get up and say hello, Kitty? Okay, I figured. Kitty and Simba must have had, according to evolution, a common ancestor back there somewhere that was some kind of wild cat that branched off, and one went to the domesticable cat that we can't. I'm not sure you really should have a lot of pet Simbas.
Tiger King.
Right, how's that worked out?
Carol Baskin's husband's dead.
Yeah. Tiger King's in jail. She seems like an evil. I have never watched this. Grant keeps me up to date on the Tiger King. Yeah, he said that. But if you go to Iowa, and nobody here's from Iowa.
It's
I think.
in the actual zoo that it is in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
I've been there. It's creepy. It's scary. It's not okay.
In Iowa, it's okay, at least it used to be, to have a mountain lion as a pet. Nebraska, we know better. You know what? They don't belong in your house. The mountain lion, those cute kittens, the little kittens, mountain lion, cute. They grow up a little bit unmanageable. They're very, yeah, and they're large, and they might be cuddly and stuff, but most of the mountain lions that we get here in Omaha, we haven't had one for a while. We had a run there most of them could be traced to the Missouri River, where somebody, some farm or something thought, oh, this would be great. My kids would like this. I'm going to get a mountain lion for them. and they grow up and they get too big, and they bring them over and they drop them off at the Missouri River thinking there's a lot of seed here, but they wander out from that and they usually follow like the creek system, which unfortunately has bike and walking trails right beside the creek system, but that's usually where they're seen along those trails. And most of them are domesticated mountain lions that got to be too much to handle, and so they got released into the wild. Those aren't meant to be domesticated. I mean, they're cute as kittens, and it'd be kind of neat, I guess, to take my mountain lion for a walk and have everybody afraid of me. Somehow that kind of like people think that, you know what I'd really like? I'd like to get a pit bull. I'd like to walk a dog that everybody is terrified of and knows that this could go just completely unleashed and tear everybody apart. And that's why if you go to the Humane Society, look with all kinds of pit bulls and pit bull crosses in there, because people think I want a tough dog, and then they can't handle it, so they just drop it off there. And you see very few of the cute, friendly little dogs there. Those are the ones people keep. Same thing. I mean, now pit bulls can be nice and they can be domesticated, but they take a lot of work. I don't think mountain lions can be. So let's leave them out in the wild. But the idea is that they had this common ancestor, and then they went in different branches. And I used to think when I was your age, and all the way through my 20s probably, I was probably pretty stubborn. And anybody that said that the life has been around for 3.5 billion years, I'm writing them off. They aren't Christians, whatever. I now know quite a few old earth Christians. They are creationists. They just think that God created it a long time ago, and so there was time not for evolution to happen, but animals have just been here for a long time. Kind of explains the dinosaurs, gives them some of the layering of the earth. They can see, they're creationists. They just think it's been here for a long, long time. I'm not. I'm a young earth. I think when God said there was a day and there was a night, and that was the first day, even before he had put the sun and the moon there to rule the day and the night, he was saying this is a normal day. We've got a day and we've got a night. That's the first day. So I take that as a literal day. But I realize as long as you believe salvation is by faith alone in Christ alone, we can discuss it in heaven. Or at least in heaven you'll know that I was right. But I was much more ready to argue when I was young than I am now. You're supposed to get kind of old and cranky and crusty, and I'm actually getting a little more flexible that way than, well, you know, people, they get cranky. They get cranky when you get older. And
Well, you're not cranky or crusty, so.
well, you know, I'm trying to stay flexible.
She didn't tell you.
All right. Now this is kind of what Jaden was talking about. Let's talk. They used to think that somewhere, and I know this isn't going to line up with where this is now, so I'll just have to.
This, or is it not?
You don't have to know.
Wow,
If we-
that is
Thanks.
What is that?
That's an amoeba, of course. We saw it, and they used to think that this amoeba was down here. That was the first ancestral cell down here that we got life. We got this amoeba. That it's just this goo that we watch go around, those paramecium or euglena, and they go around. There's not much to it. But now they realize that there's an awful lot of chemistry going on in there to have them catch that, to know without being able to see it, to be able to surround it and make that pseudopod, make these little false feet come out here and surround it, to be able to reproduce in a way that both cells are functioning. A lot of stuff going on with that. It can't be there, so it has moved up, and it's way up the tree. Now, we have no idea what would be down here, because all life, once it's alive and it's going to reproduce, as Jaden was saying, that's a complex thing. When we talk about mitosis, it had to be capable, and that's the simplest reproduction. Just the cell, one cell divides into two cells. Very, very complex to do that, So where did that first one come from? We've got nothing, we've got this goo, lightning hits it, suddenly we've got this going on, and I'm not sure how they're gonna come up with that, but the only other alternative is that there is a creator involved, and then there's rules that they gotta follow, and it gets messy after that. But they did try to put the bacteria there, but they still found that it's way too complicated. Archaea is a type of bacteria, but this is the one thing, and we'll go over it again, it's got its own domain. That's the one that doesn't get its energy from the sun. Everything else does that we know of on Earth. This is down in mid-ocean ridges, no sunlight gets there, gets its energy from the heat of the Earth coming up, the magma, and it doesn't use oxygen, it uses the sulfur that comes out. Oxygen and sulfur are in the same family, so they do the same thing. So it's very much similar to what oxygen does, but it's just from a different source. So they give it its own domain. It's not even part of the animal kingdom. Neither is the bacteria, but I have to get rid of my A2, but my amoeba there, it will stay with us otherwise. All right, and this one, that's not as bad as what it looks, but you will need to know, be able to give me these in order. I will help you out, make it simpler for you. I will.
We had to memorize this in like 7th grade. It's already done.
Oh,
I made a song for it, but I'm not.
What is this?
really? You tell us that and you're
Wait.
not going to sing for
Wait,
us.
which one is this part of?
Evan, will you tell me?
This is just underneath this. It's just, whoops, part of evolution. This is still part of the evolution, because this is all on the presumed evolutionary relationship. When we name things, we are naming, giving it an address. Going down this gives us an address on the tree, what branch, limb, all the way out to the little twig where it's sitting. That gives us the address for it. And again, as a creationist, instead of a tree, I would look at it more as shelves. And these that are in the same genus, these have characteristics that are similar, so we're going to put them together. A lot like what we did with the periodic table, we put these elements all together because they have similar characteristics, so we put them in a column. Mr. Mendeleev, Dr. D, if you remember the power of the periodic table and trying to help Sam get ready for his test. And that video, he actually put them, the rows were the ones that were similar. It fits nicer on charts that roll up if we flip them 90 degrees. But we organize them according to similar characteristics. So we use these naming things to organize them in the same way. But it is based on evolution, what Mr. Darwin did for us. Now, it's important the stuff on the right-hand side, they're most inclusive. If we talk about the domains, if we use the domain eukarya, which we haven't talked about what a eukaryote is yet, I'll ruin the story a little bit for you and give it. If a cell has a nucleus that you can see, kind of like your cheek cell, where when we put the stain on it, you saw that little blue dot in the middle, that's a nucleus where your DNA is inside that because it actually was yours. If you were looking at your cheek cells, inside that, what got stained was actually your DNA. It absorbs the stain, so you could see the, you could see the DNA in there. It wasn't in any way. You'll get to see some chromosomes made out of DNA much clearer under the microscope later. But as long as it has one of those, then it's a eukaryote. Prokaryotes just have DNA just kind of free in there, no nucleus. That's like the bacteria and the archaea. Everything else is a eukaryote. So all plants and animals, all of them, insects, every kind of plant, they're all in the same domain. So millions, literally millions of different species, kinds, are in the domain. So that's a huge, huge group. And each time we go down, we keep narrowing it. Now we can go down to kingdoms. There's 4 kingdoms. You have Animalia, Plantae, fungus, and protista underneath that. And then you can go down to the phylum order, and if you're under Animalia, then you can go into a certain type of animals, whether they have a backbone or not. Class, mammals, just the mammals. So now there's still a lot. There's a lot of mammals out there, but not near as many as there were up here. Come down to the order, family, and it comes down, all the way down to genus and species. Homo sapiens, that would be us. And it would be just us. So this is the least inclusive down here. Only one species by the time you get down here, one thing. Now there could be some variations, just like if we talk about Homo sapiens, a lot of different peoples that there, and we don't usually get confused unless they're twins or something that we can't tell what lots, but we're all people. Same thing with dogs. Dogs come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and everything, but they're all dogs. So there's only one species, lots and lots up here. So that's what the most inclusive and least inclusive means. All right, now, Evan, we'd love to hear that song because they gotta know this too. I mean, it seems like the
Yes,
friendly
please.
thing to help them out.
So it's like,
Oh,
Kingdom Phylum Class, we're a family genus species. Kingdom Phylum Class, we're a family genus species.
There you go. And he just needs somebody to beatbox behind him. And now you have to start with, you learned what I learned when I was a kid. We've upped it another level.
I can remember domain though.
Domain. What I learned, this isn't near as clever as what he did. Mine has no rhythm to it, which kind of makes sense. Somebody who got not kicked out of, but told they didn't have to go to two different church choirs. That my dad was the pastor of both churches. My mom, she had a hard time with that. But it makes sense that I didn't have any rhythm. I just learned, and I'm a boomer. My teacher said, hey, this is what you do, and I memorized it, and I still know it. King Philip came over for green spinach. But now they've added domain, so you have to make it the interrogative variety of that. Did King Philip come over for green spinach? It's not near as clever as that. Nobody's going to be.
the way they
but-
started it was really fantastic.
Yeah, I was like, what's the beat again? Oh yeah.
He doesn't usually have to do his own. He usually has a DJ to give him the beat to start it out.
Where's Simon when you need him?
You have to memorize these.
You do. You're going to have to
We're
know
gonna have a quiz for it.
soon. Not tomorrow. No, that's not soon. That's immediately, but soon. Did King Philip come over for green spinach?
No, didn't.
Yeah, no, he did. That's what you're going to remember. Or you got to learn his little rhythm over there. And it's true that most of the time, music, putting it to songs, it's the same thing, but it makes it easier to memorize. My kids, when they were homeschooled, they learned verses. Some off and on, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Off and on, they would learn memory verses to this CD to music. They can still sing those songs and they can still say those verses just because it was to music.
Actually helps.
It does. I'm a boomer, so I'm not sure I would classify that as actually music, but to most of them it would be. But that's just because I'm getting old, cranky, and a little bit crusty. All right, binomial name. Everybody gets a binomial name as a species. As I look up here,
43.
43. Thank you. How do you guys learn this?
Because I just looked.
I have it written on my binder.
You get two of them, and they have to be in the Latin. And we do that because those don't change. Nobody speaks Latin anymore as a rule. I mean, some people know Latin. You can go to a church, a Catholic church here in town where the Mass is given in Latin, but nobody speaks it. There's no new words coming up. Like there's no addition of words like Googled or something in the new where they give you new words in the dictionary this year. There aren't in Latin. So they use it. It's a dead language, so it will always stay the same. And the first one, the genus, is capitalized. The specific epithet which is usually just called the species, is not. And it should either be underlined or in italics. It's hard for you guys to write in italics to be noticeable italics, so most of the time you just underline it. It's always two, the genus and specific epithet, which is just another word for the species. So garden pea, which will be important when we get to genetics, because Gregor Mendel did all his genetics work with the garden pea, Pisum sativum. And it also works if you're speaking it, if you speak Russian or if you speak French or German or something, you have different, they don't say garden pea, but they do say Pisum sativum. Yeah. They will have the same binomial name for them. All right, last one for, no. Everybody's saying it's just notes, it doesn't have to be perfect.
That's why you go home and write them in avocado.
Now, is it avocado colored or are there avocados on it?
Okay,
Or
that was
if you
an
want-
avocados like, I just took a picture of it last night and showed you, but I was like, meh, that's kind of.
Well, I didn't know, from before, I didn't know whether you just wrote it in an avocado colored pen or whatever.
That would be a
No
really
one
ugly
calls
color,
a color
actually.
off. Maybe you can.
People
Your
that are
shirt
old
is
and cranky and
very
crusty.
avocado-ish.
Stop calling yourself crusty.
This is all crap.
That is
Olive. It is more olive.
All right.
Avocado is definitely more like bright green.
I don't even.
Unless it's
I
gross.
like the color, but I don't like olives. All right, last one. 3 domains. I know, but it's
We only
not
have
as
4
bad.
minutes.
I know. Don't erase. Don't
Kelly, you know
erase.
why it took so long to read the last slide?
Because I messed
3
up on my
domains.
confusion or something like 8 times. Yeah, it was confusion.
The domain Archaea sounds like a Swedish furniture brand.
Like IKEA.
Prokaryote means it's not unicellular, although all prokaryotes are unicellular, but it lacks a membrane-bound nucleus. It doesn't have a nucleus in it. The DNA is just floating around in there. They're still giving it a shot at, some people think that it might have been the first, seems how it formed way down in the ocean underneath without even needing any sunlight or anything. Because if you need sunlight, usually there's a interconnectedness you need with the whole plants and everything, but down there, so that some people still think that might be, although most are saying that no, it's too complex, it couldn't have been the first. Some people say, well, hard to say first, because since it's so different, it had to be independent of, which then why independent? Would it be so similar to bacteria if it started completely? You'd think if just random chance, it would be different, but it's not. Bacteria, also prokaryote, very similar to the Archaea, except it actually uses oxygen and is solar based. And it used to be thought to be the first cells on Earth, but they are much too complex. And there are lots of different types of bacteria. They come in 3 basic shapes: rods, spheres, and then kind of spirilla, kind of spirals that kind of like pasta. I gluten-free pasta. Don't.
Rice noodles.
There you go. Yeah, they would be. They would be much more. They would be skinny like that. They wouldn't be thick. So, and then most life would be under the domain eukarya. Prokaryotes. Pro means first, like a prototype is the first one, and then we actually develop it. The EU, the prefix means true. So these are the true cells. and they actually have a nucleus and all the DNA is in there. And that's what, like the amoeba is in there, and again, they thought that used to be the first, but that is even more complicated now. Tomorrow, this is where we will start tomorrow. That's your name.
No way.
Is Bailey.
Bailey, you're insane.
I was just speed writing. I didn't care how good it looked. I just happened to rewrite it anyways.
Have you seen me eat any fish yet?
Huh? Have you seen? No, I've been watching.
Just be on the right
I saw you
watching
eat
all
fish.
sides of
Bro, bitch on that bitch.
it. Where's Big Boy at? Where's Bill? Oh, there he is.
Where's he at?
Now you have barely seen him eat a fish before.
That's tough.
There was this one dumb fish who kept swimming into the thing and it kept pushing him up. He was stuck.
Oh, the bubbles?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
I know,
was
I saw
stuck.
that
It was so
earlier.
funny.
pencil is this?
I saw him when he was crying out.
I don't know whose it was, we got left here, that's how I get all my pencils.
That's how I lose all my pencils. I literally don't know where I'm at.
Mr. Schmidt.
It's dripping down the side.
Is it?
Yeah. What is? Oh, the tank. Oh yeah, I was doing that before.
Always right.
Is he it?
No, you may not see it.
Mr. Schmidt, hang on, I've got a leak.
Yeah, so.
That was really popping. I can see you.
You got me. That was kind of funny.
Now, stretch it.
Oh, no, it wasn't kind
Come
of
here.
funny.
Now, come here. Now, come here. No, you said it was gonna be. You're gonna stretch it. Ready? Ready? Oh, it's not even gonna hurt. It's gonna be super soft. And you have the mask on. Oh. Yeah, it is.
Hey.
Miss Green like went over at Gavin when Gavin came. Okay. Okay.
Give me my water bottle. Give me my water bottle.
They'll never eat him.
Taking no one to jail. Too bad.
You're ruining your water bottle. I'm gonna fix it.
Right in front of you.
How are you gonna fix that?
Yes.
Get out my backpack. I'm trying to
Give me my water
fix
bottle. Okay, then give me my water bottle. Give me my
Get
water
off my
bottle.
backpack.
Then give me my water bottle.
I'm trying to fix it.
What?
I'm trying to fix it.
Okay. What's your fix it then?
No, don't touch my backpack.
Mary's got it until you get it.
Trying to bring it back.
It's right.
I always end up
I'm
giving
giving
my
my sweatshirt to somebody.
When are you gonna give it?
I'm trying to fix it.
Fix it already.
Look at him. You said no.
Bubbles, they're like this.
I think they're surfing, they like it.
It's
They're
funny.
surfing. Yeah, that's fair.
He's gonna kill himself trying to go above the water.
Hey, Shmi.
All right, sit down.
Can I go to the restroom?
Well, I'm
Can I turn
going
off the light?
sweatpants all week.
You wait until the bell rang to,
Can I turn off the light?
no, not yet,
Not yet.
no.
It's because
I'll take a nap. Go. Is the other class ahead of us?
You messed my stuff.
I didn't mess it up. I fixed it. Just
Yes,
a little.
they are.
How are they ahead of us?
You do this. I think it's. I'm starting to think it's your fault.
We just
This happened last year.
Well, yeah.
really don't though. We're not even talking about what we did
We
last
talk a
year.
lot to him.
All right,
We're just really nice to you.
and we already did,
It's all right.
oops.
Bro.